Firstly, congratulations to you and your wife on the new addition to your family. My question relates to the National Student Accommodation Strategy and the status of it now, given that the last report was in Q3 of 2019. And why has this accommodation strategy died, Minister? And if it's not dead, it has certainly been left wither on the vine. We had an action plan, and why has it been dropped? Looking at Waterford, the plan appears to me to take no action. The goal of government appears there was to be no additional student accommodation provided in the city beyond what had already been developed. A number of years ago, the department was instrumental in disassembling WIT's capability to deliver student accommodation, most notably by removing its borrowing capacity. Having done that, the department has provided nothing in exchange by means of new accommodation for the South East students in our regional capital city.
Thank you to Deputy Shanahan, thank you for your good wishes and thank you for your important question. I won't repeat the points that I made in relation to Deputy Conway Walsh, but they stand in relation to this question too, but specifically in relation to Waterford Institute of Technology, which I hope and expect will become a technological university shortly. I do take the point the Deputy makes, but I would disagree slightly when the Deputy says, or disagree strongly in fact, when the Deputy says my department or the government has done nothing to assist, because with the publication of Housing for All, we have changed that policy, or indeed you could argue we have reversed that policy, because we've now made it very clear that we want institutes of technology and technological universities to be able to access the borrowing framework, to be able to access very cheap money using the state's infrastructure. And as recently as last week, my officials, right up to the Secretary General of my department, met with all of the representative bodies, including the IUA and THEA, along with Department of Housing officials and my advisors, to make this very clear to our colleges that we want them to be coming forward with proposals. I'll shortly meet with the Housing Finance Agency, with Minister Darragh O'Brien as well. And I must say I am encouraged by the pipeline of projects that I see now coming forward from institutes of technology, technological universities and from the traditional universities. So while I accept some of the criticism, at the same time I do think it is accurate to say that there's been a very significant policy shift spearheaded by my department since its creation in relation to making sure those IoTs and technological universities can access the borrowing framework. We have a national student accommodation strategy. I can again read out some of the progress that has been made, and it is a statement of fact that supply has increased. However, as I said to Deputy Conway Walsh, that's not the entirety of my position, because I believe that that strategy is in many ways out of date, in many ways is overtaken by circumstance, and I think was too reliant on just the private sector providing purpose-built student accommodation. I would much rather, in terms of the sustainable situation, have college-owned, sector-owned accommodation. But there's a little rub. If we're going to allow these institutes of technology and universities access the borrowing framework, I want them to address the affordability issue as well. I don't want to see what I've seen in some colleges and universities where they build very fancy accommodation that is unaffordable for our students. And then when I meet students' unions, they say, sure, Minister, it's no good telling me there's an extra 500 beds going there or 600 beds going there because the price is extortionate. So our ask in return for accessing the borrowing framework will be, how do you make sure it's affordable to students?
Well, Minister, affordability will certainly be a problem if you do not have supply. And I've looked at the report and there wasn't a single piece of additional student accommodation in that report that was generated in Waterford. And WIT, the reason it was one of the premier ITs in the country was because it had its own ability to borrow until the TU was brought into PAC and essentially had their feet held to the fire where there was lots of smoke but absolutely no fire. Nothing to be seen, Minister, but you could have reinstated the borrowing capability to WIT, but you did not. And Waterford had borrowed for more than 20 years to make itself, as I say, one of the premier institutes in the country, and that capability was removed from it in terms of this national accommodation strategy. And as I said to you, the report is here in front of me. There is no additional capacity for student accommodation in Waterford, and in fact, in terms of the take-up of new student numbers, we're static when the sector has grown itself by, I think, between 15 and 20% in the past 5 years. So, Minister, we need remediation, and while I'm on the subject of it, can I also point out to you that there was applications in from WIT. Thank you for almost 20 million for buildings that are over 40 years old, where the water is coming through the engineering building roof at present. Minister, no sign of any funding to come and sort that problem first.
Well, thank you to the Deputy on the specific issue he raised there at the end of his contribution. I will engage with him on that matter and revert back to him, and I'll give that commitment on the floor of this House. But the point we're making is somewhat the same, Deputy. You say you haven't done anything to assist. I'm saying very clearly I've done exactly what I think you're asking me to do. I've rectified with government colleagues, with Minister O'Brien, a discrimination that has existed towards our institutes of technology and our technological universities. I don't want to just create technological universities for the regions that people can just commute to. I see a real benefit from a regional development point of view that people, not just from Waterford, will study in the Technological University in Waterford, but the people from my own county or other counties will say, geez, that's a great university down there in Waterford. I want to go there, I want to move there, but I need to be able to access accommodation and it needs to be affordable. So we have made a very significant policy shift in Housing for All, and it is one that recognises that it's a very clear commitment to support our technological universities to develop purpose-built student accommodation. And that's the difference. Up to now, you're reliant on, will a private developer build a purpose-built student accommodation? I'm saying, no, we want to work with the technological university to build it itself, or at least to own it itself. And I'm very happy to work with you in the context of the South East on that matter.
Good Chair. Look, Minister, as I said to you, the key here is about the access to borrowing. And you're saying, OK, that you want to do it through the TU. I'm saying to you that we had the capability until the department removed it from us. And certainly WIT was absolutely progressive, the first TU in the country to actually engage in providing its own student accommodation. And that capability has been removed. We're waiting on your present accommodation strategy, which your last report, as we've outlined, is January 2019. So as I said to you, it looks as if the strategy is withering on the vine. I can't see any new capability in terms of delivering what you're talking about, affordability. This sounds years down the road to me when we are trying to increase our intake of numbers, trying to add to our capacity of the university. So look, Minister, I think a lot of work needs to be done on this. I will certainly be happy to engage with you, Minister, but I think we need to see some clear action points delivered on this.
So firstly, the strategy is not withering on the vine. The targets in the strategy have all been exceeded. The 2019 target was exceeded, and as of Q2 of this year, 10,700 bed spaces have been completed. But I'm making the point we need to move beyond the strategy. I'm making the point that this strategy is measuring how many private purpose-built student accommodations were built, and there's a role for that. I want the new strategy, the new conversation to be about how do we work with the regions and indeed with all our universities and institutes of technology and TUs to build their own accommodation. And the very significant shift, and WIT will be well aware of this through their rep bodies meeting last week with my Secretary General, the very significant shift is we now have a mechanism to make sure that they can get borrowing again using the state's infrastructure and accessing cheap money. However, I'm not going to be a bystander in relation to this. If we're going to allow that, I want to have a conversation about what sort of accommodation and how is it affordable to students. Because there are examples in this country where the state's infrastructure has been used or European infrastructure has been used and some of the accommodation that has been produced has been prohibitive in terms of cost to students. And that's not the policy direction. But I'd love to engage with you further on this and make progress for the South East.